What is All In? What is the premise of the podcast?
All In is a podcast with 4 friends who are all capital allocators. In other words, like venture capitalists, investors, and business builders. And I guess in all cases, 4 folks who are 50 years old with 30 years of business experience each. So that's about over 120 years building businesses or investing in them, getting together and talking about business, and then whatever the topics of the day are. But everybody's a little unique and different. And it started as something we did in COVID because we would all play poker together. And 4 of the poker players eventually wound up doing this every week, this podcast. And this is in decade 2 of me podcasting. And so I kind of created a format that I modeled after the McLaughlin Group, which was a Sunday morning show.
Don't know it.
So yeah, there's a guy McLaughlin. You can look up some tapes of it. Anyway, this guy McLaughlin was super cantankerous, and he'd have like a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, whatever, a young person, a Bostonian person, a California hippie, whatever. And he was always cantankerous and moving the conversation along, and he would say wrong and do this, and it was like a very full contact kind of dynamic, interrupt each other conversation. But I was always drew me in. It's the best Sunday morning political show of all time, the McLaughlin Group. And so Chamath and I had known each other from AOL. He was working at AOL when I sold my company there, the blogging company back in the day. We had met. He became a venture capitalist, and then he met Mark Zuckerberg, and he was one of the first employees at Facebook, grew Facebook from 10 million to 800 million users or something crazy like that. He was responsible for the growth team. Super intelligent, considered fun, thoughtful guy, dynamic, aggressive, and just great leader of people. We became friends. We started playing cards together, joking, laughing. And I said, I really would like to have you on my podcast. He wanted to be under the radar. He didn't want people to know who Chamath Palihapitiya was, but he came on the podcast. In a lot of ways, like Chris Sacca did, our friend, was one of the first people. I think I was one of the first people to actually have him on a podcast when I did my 2-parter with him. So Chamath became a bit of a brand after he was on the podcast a couple of times, and then he keynoted a couple of events, and we just had this rapport. And the rapport came from just breaking chops and laughing at the poker game every week. And then people saw that rapport when we were on stage. And then he said to me one time when he was coming out of CNBC, we should just do a podcast together. I was like, yeah, come on This Week in Startups. He said, no, I want to do a different type of thing, just me and you. And you just bring up the news of the week. I talk about it. Then I ask you a question, and then you talk about it. And we go back and forth. Startups, public markets, SPACs, public, private. I was like, that's a really good idea. Sure. Let's do it. And we started texting back and forth. And what are you going to call it? And I was like, we should give like a poker thing. Since it's like poker, we should call it All In. And so the 2 of us started doing it, but this was during COVID. So then we're like, well, who knows about COVID? And Sachs had been doing a bunch of research on it. And he had bought ventilators and he had masks.
So explain who Sachs is.
So David Sachs is an old friend of mine who worked at PayPal with Peter Thiel, went to college with Peter Thiel, is a Republican, independent, really like chess club, debate club, brilliant product manager, created Yammer, sold to Microsoft for $1 billion. Just really smart individual, but right-leaning, like seriously right-leaning, like writing articles, donating to people on the right. And we became close friends. Our families would go on vacation together, just, as close of friends as you could be. And then we had him on as a guest to talk about like, hey, what's going on with this Wuhan flu thing? And, what's going on with Trump? And, people were very scared and confused at the time. And then we had another friend who came to poker. I didn't have a big relationship with Freeberg at the time. I just knew him from poker. And David Freeberg, who runs something called the Production Board, he was an early Google employee, came on, and he actually is like, he created climate.com and sold that to Monsanto. So he understands science like at a very deep level. And so all of a sudden, this thing clicks, and then Robinhood and that whole AMC thing happened. And I was an investor in Robinhood, and we started talking about that. And the show just caught heat, and the dynamic between the 4 of us, people really started to like, and people were at home.
Caught heat in a good way.
I think caught heat in like, wow, this is really dynamic. They're smart, they're opinionated, and they're successful. And so when people see that you've made a lot of money, is one thing I learned in my life. It's like the day before the Weblogs Inc., sale, and then the day after when I had no money and then became a millionaire, people treated me incredibly different. Like all of a sudden I got like 30 more IQ points and I was 2 feet taller. I was like, I'm the same guy, but like people would just take you a lot more seriously.
Yeah.
And it just is a really good thing to understand. Like literally if you inherited $1 billion, people would think you're a genius. It's a big failing of human nature that we have this weird thing with the scorecard, that we think the scorecard of dollars is like important. It's not. Long story short, all the stuff comes together and people, it seems to connect with people and it starts racing up the charts. And the last couple of weeks, I think we're number 24, 26, 27, like just
Yeah.
top 30 podcasts in the world. Gwyneth Paltrow wrote about it in her Goop newsletter a couple of weeks ago that she's obsessed with the podcast, the personalities. And so, This Week in Startups had millions of listeners every month and doing incredible 5 days a week, making millions of dollars in advertising, but it's a very niche thing. It's just about startups. So if you're in the startup space, like you would want to take a selfie with me. All In has crossed over in a way like you experienced with the Tim Ferriss podcast and, people who are pursuing excellence. It's a much wider aperture of people.
Yeah.
And so this thing just appeals to a lot of people. And it's literally, people say it's like their Sunday morning ritual or their Saturday morning ritual. It's replaced the Sunday morning talk show. And it turns out Politico is writing some kind of a profile of us right now because it's become so influential in Washington because we talk about the economy, technology, and technology is obviously having a big impact on the economy and politics, whatever. So anyway, in some ways, it's become a hit. It's very weird for me because, I've had a couple of hits before, but this one also is bigger and I'm not in control of it. I have 3 partners and all 3 of my partners on it have never had a boss. So you've literally got 4 of the most opinionated friends who've never had a boss, who have 4 different directions they want to take it. And it is a bit chaotic. And I'm the producer of it as well.
Yeah.
And, did all the work, came up with the format, et cetera. But objectively, Chamath has a series of fans. Freeberg now has his stands. Sachs has the whole right wing. So it's like a super team has come together.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to keep a super team together for any period of time. And this thing has come off the rails famously like 2 or 3 times.
Could you walk us through your favorite of those 3 times and how it was resolved?
Well, I wanted to do an event because you mentioned before I like events. And I was like, let's do this All In Summit. I'll do all the work. And you guys show up. I have a production team. And, here's what it will be. And one of the 4 of us was in a complete panic and complaining and arguing incessantly because he thought I was going to ruin their reputation because what if it's not great? The thing comes out of the gate. People are comparing it to the TED conference, saying this is better than Recode or better than TED, and it's the new TED and whatever, because we got the most incredible speakers in the world showed up for us. Just everybody. I had invited you. You didn't make it, but I'll get you next year. Maybe, I don't know if I can afford your speaking fee. But
if it makes you feel any better, I remember this, and I have not done any speaking except for South by Southwest, I want to say in 3 or 4 years. Yeah. So, but
no, there'll be some opportunity where it'll be a fun thing for us to do.
And in my own defense, I have been to events of yours before. I have spoken with you at events. So I couldn't make that one.
Yes, you did one of mine.
Yes. Okay. All right. So wait, where does the conflict come in?
So the conflict came in that I just told him hey, listen, I'm working over here. You need to shut the fuck up and let me just do my work and stop being in a panic attack all the time. And he's like, my reputation. I said, what if it's bad? People paid $7,500 ticket. I'm like, listen, people pay $7,500 ticket for every event. It's not a big deal. And then I gave half the tickets for scholarship for people. Anyway, we had this back and forth. And then I told the person, Freeberg, I was like, Freeberg, if you don't want to be on the show and you're complaining so much, I got Brad Gerstner over here.
I love how he was anonymous up until right now.
Whatever. Anyway, the good news is Freeberg and I, after this blowout, like many friendships, we actually are really enjoying our time together. But it was another one of these stab you in the back, stab you in the face thing. You got the quote from Doug. I said, listen, if you're not enjoying your time on the All In podcast and you don't want to do the event, why don't you do 25 episodes a year? And I'll have Brad Gerstner who sits in when one of us is out as the 5th Beatle. I'll have him do the other 25. We got this big fight and the whole thing's going to explode. And then these 2 are going to do their own podcast, whatever. And then we all just sat down and we realized the audience fucking loves this. We love it. Let's not do any events. Let's not do any spin outs.
Yeah.
People wanted to do a TV show with us, top networks, all this stuff. And you understand how big the podcasting business now is better than anybody. You got a top 50 podcasts. These podcasts have become a very big business.